Hey, it's Kristen from the Center for Natural Pain Solutions. Thanks everyone for joining in today. I'm really excited to be speaking with Katie, a former patient of the clinics. Katie is joining in today from Ireland, so welcome, Katie.
Thank
Thanks for
you.
being here
Thanks for
today.
having me.
Yeah, could we just start out by telling everybody a little bit about yourself, where you are, where you're from, what you're doing?
Sure. I'm Katie. I used to be a long-standing patient at Natural Pain. I call it Natural Pain Solutions, and it's too long otherwise. And I currently live in Dublin, Ireland. I'm a professional athlete out here. I train in mixed martial arts, which is the easiest way to put it is the biggest organization, the UFC, puts it on, essentially a form of cage fighting, but that's not what we like to call it. So I'm out here training like that, and I'm here today to talk to you about my experience.
Awesome, thanks.
No worries.
You had come to us back all the way back in about May 2014. So tell us a little bit
Mm.
about what happened and your injury.
Yes, that was exactly. I love that you guys know that. It was May 2014. I was an amateur boxer for many years, but I don't know. We will probably come back to that. But I had transitioned to training in mixed martial arts, and I was getting ready for my first amateur mixed martial arts competition, which were very hard to come by in Canada at the time, and still are, sadly, just in Canada. And I was very excited about it. I was training for that. Um, Unfortunately, I was training with someone who was fairly infamous with his intensity, and he was a larger man, and I don't know, he stepped off a powerful right hand and decided to drill it into my jaw. And so I hit my head on the padded wall behind me and came back front, almost like a whiplash motion. So I ended up with a fairly, at the time, seemed like harmless, but decent concussion, and things go from there. So the steps through all of that get very tricky and long. So we can go into that, but that's essentially what happened. Uh, yeah, that would have been, was that 8 years ago? Yeah, about eight
8
years
years
ago.
ago.
Yeah.
Wow.
Wow, I
So how
know.
did you? That's a lifetime almost. It feels like
Yeah.
sometimes.
Yep.
After the I guess the initial injury, like how did you feel?
It was actually pretty interesting because I just remember getting very mad about it, because I got kind of drilled, and it wasn't the first time it had happened to me. I'm not going to say that I had multiple concussions because if I did, they were very minor and there were no symptoms. But well, not at least that were any of any concern. So this was the first time I felt like it was a bit of a stun. And so what was interesting about it was I was able to continue training, but what happened was someone else threw kind of a light punch after, and it felt harder than it needed to. It was very odd. It was like, how did that feel like that? It was odd. So I then started to feel almost as if I'd taken some kind of like painkiller or something. I was very spacey, kind of looking at my coach a little funny, just like felt like I was a little bit in a dream. Drove home a little bit worried because I felt very foggy, very strange. It was almost within the hour. And I called a friend of mine who played hockey, who'd had multiple concussions, and he told me not to worry. And from there, things got progressively worse, but it's very hard to put into to steps there. But that first night, I was quite concerned just on how I was feeling and how long it lasted.
Right, that sounds a bit scary,
It
actually.
was, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So when did you decide, or how did you decide that, hey, like this isn't normal and I'm not really feeling better, I should find help?
I remember being kind of clinging on to the idea of still getting into that fight, thinking, like this may pass in a week. That is very common. And
Right.
I was like, I think I do have a concussion because I do have headaches. Most of the worry came from just the stiffness in my neck, which is all very common when you have a head injury in sport. But I think what made me deep down know something was wrong was just the fogginess, the the discomfort in my body that seemed to be deeper than your average like moment that you're like, I could have, a bonk to the head. This felt deeper. There was a deep discomfort going on, traps, motion. I had a teammate in boxing who had told me about Dr. Rock, and I swear that it was like a sign from whatever higher power there is that I saw him within days of getting this. Because don't get me wrong, you panic and you go elsewhere too. But that was
Sure.
the first person I saw, and it was the last person I saw. Um, and it worked out for the best. But initially, like there were panic days where I would run off to this clinic or that clinic, and they were all in all useless. And I was treated not well, and it all worked out. But yeah, that was within 3 days of getting the concussion that I saw Dr. Rock at your clinic.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I'm sorry you had those experiences at your
Oh,
other places, but thankful that you were able to find Dr. Rock.
it wasn't great. It was like a bad dream, But yeah, I'm just so grateful that my teammate at the time just knew about him, and he was also a smaller fighter, and I think sometimes we just come by big partners, and we're just at a higher risk of getting hurt with these big people. So I was so lucky he knew about him, and he wasn't able to be as fortunate as I was with his recovery, as he found Dr. Rock quite a bit later, and I think he got quite discouraged and scared, and that's fair. So, and I'm here to
Sure.
tell you why not to be. So,
Yeah. Do you remember that initial appointment with Dr. Rock?
yeah,
Yeah.
there were so many, but I do remember he was so good because he wasn't telling me necessarily to pull out of a competition or anything yet, because he knew that in his experience that this could be short-lived. He didn't know how severe until things kept going. I think initially, deep down, he was like, yeah, this could be a good one, but it's his job to hold off until he knows for sure.
Right.
And it was actually me who came to see him the following week and told him that I had pulled out of the competition. I was like, this isn't going to work. And he was like, ha, good, because I was going to tell you to do that. But it wasn't, he was just giving it to the last bit. But I also wanted to be fair to my opponent at the time and just pull out with the notice. And yeah, that first one was not the scariest one, because you don't know how long it's going to go. Yeah, the first appointment with Dr. Rock was almost like an encouraging one, because I just knew he knew what he was talking about. But with these types of injuries, there's no way of really knowing how severe until you're getting like a couple weeks in. And so, no, the first one was not the scariest one. It was weeks into that, and as symptoms started to show themselves, and I started to be true to what was actually going on with my body. So,
Right. Right. So when you talk about symptoms, like on a day-to-day basis, as you noticed things were progressively kind of getting worse, how did that affect your day-to-day life, your activities, even your mood, or
yeah, the mood's I'm not gonna lie, I'm not the easiest person to deal with, minus a head injury. So I wasn't like your first candidate to get something like this, because I was already a moody individual who had dealt with some mental health issues. But I guess that makes me a good candidate for sharing my story as well. So that being said, moods were kind of, goes without saying that it was a fairly erratic. The symptoms, they were always so hard to describe, because what I used to say to Dr. Rock was, lightheaded, uneasy. I felt like I was kind of trapped in my own body. I would turn even so much as to shoulder check in the car, and there'd be an uneasiness. It felt very central, though. It didn't feel like vertigo or anything quite that intense. It just felt very confined. And if I was close to the ground, for example, where I do a martial art called jiu-jitsu, it's part of the MMA stuff I do, it would be even worse close to the ground. And it's not like I could really explain why, until I spoke to another fighter actually who reached out to me midway through my recovery, which I can get back to. But it was mostly when I would turn around, or actually in the shower was a big one. I used to close my eyes a lot in the shower, and I wasn't able to do that anymore. I would feel uncomfortable when my eyes were shut. and it all was linked to that spatial awareness and my central nervous system, obviously. So it was really terrifying because I wouldn't need a headache to know something was wrong.
Right.
And yeah, to go without saying, my eye drifting in one direction was probably one sign that made me want to lose hope in the whole process.
Yeah, and when you say your eye drifting, is that something like Dr. Rock noticed?
Yeah.
And
I actually
yeah,
had family members when emotional outbursts would be actually what caused most of my symptoms to. I obviously couldn't exercise for a certain period, which again we can go over, but harsh exercise and or emotional outbursts would cause those moments to come. And a couple of times when I got really upset, I had two people close to me notice that my eye didn't look normal. It looked as if it was going off to a different side of my. It's scary to talk about, but it almost looked like it was looking off in a different direction.
right, right. Wow.
Yeah.
So you had mentioned like you weren't able to train as you would have liked. I know for me, like fitness, working out is such a big part of my mental health. So what were you able to do? Or you maybe not able to do anything, and how did that affect your recovery?
That was the first probably June, July, August. The first 6 months were sadly the hardest because I couldn't raise my heart rate without having some kind of a setback. And setbacks are interesting because Dr. Rock will tell you it's kind of like climbing Everest. Setbacks aren't necessarily bad. It's like you adjust, you come back, you adjust, you come back. But at that time, I was not to be doing that. I was sort of, you'll have times where you're being stubborn and you're doing it anyway. And you're like, oh, well, I feel nauseous and have a headache. It's not a big deal. But what it would do was prolong your recovery. You weren't ready. And I was such an avid athlete and was just coming into what I wanted to do. And I actually wasn't able to work out for 9 months. I couldn't raise my heart rate. My body changed. I couldn't drink coffee. Luckily, I could drive and I could, sometimes use screens. I know there are people who are worse off, but I know they can still also get to where I am now if they put their mind to it. It's just, it took everything from me, everything. And I was not a fun person to be around.
That sounds just amazingly hard.
Yeah. I had like a team at one stage of people who helped me. And if without them, like this never would have happened. And they all played a different role. But first off, I'll mention the homework. Now that's the hard part because there's parts of this that people have trouble understanding. And it's kind of like a rehab for any muscle. It can aggravate it. Let's say you're rehabbing your knee, it gets swollen, it can aggravate it. And you're like, this can't be right. But you're not as worried when you're doing it to a knee as you are your brain. So some of these brain exercises on your iPad and all of that, they can be very uncomfortable. And the reason that I stuck to everything he said, like I did these things 4 times a day, sometimes up to half an hour. And I think there was maybe a time when my mother got sick that I maybe missed one a day for a few months, but I was doing them up to 4 times a day. And because Dr. Rock told me he could get me back in the cage or ring at the time, whatever, he didn't care what it was. He just told me he was going to get me back because of the faith he gave me. And I'm not a religious person, but that's the best word I can use. I stuck to it. I said, you know what? I am way too stubborn for this. This is all I've ever wanted. I'm good at this. I'm not taking no for an answer. So I just did everything he said. And it was hard to do. I embarrassed myself. I would be at someone's house and I'd be like, I got to go do this. I would be at a job I had where I only worked a few hours a day. I couldn't work very long with the symptoms, but I would do it in the office at work and there'd be people seeing me doing these things. And yeah, it was humiliating at times, but I just listened to everything he said. Every day.
Every day.
Every day. Not a day went that I didn't do it.
Incredible. And look where you are now. I mean, it's
yeah.
coming off
They
of a
were,
big win last month.
oh, thanks.
Congrats.
Thank you. It was a hard fight and a risk, and I'm very excited about it. Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
so amazing.
Thank you.
It was,
Thank you.
I just was sharing it everywhere with everybody.
Oh,
Look at
that's
Katie,
very
look at
sweet.
Katie.
Thank
Yeah.
you. It was a pretty unlikely I was going to get back to a sport like that, you know, taking headshots, being comfortable doing that again. You don't even know when I got back to actually working out, when people would accidentally bump me in the head, the freakouts I would have, just, you know, I'd blame it all on them. And like, it wasn't an easy road, and I alienated a lot of people. Um, Family, my family's amazing. They were still there, but it was scary to get back, but I just trusted Dr. Rock, and along with him, there's a lot of people I should mention, but whenever that's appropriate to say, there was like a team of people who got me here.
Yeah, you can definitely. What else
Yeah.
helped your recovery?
Well, at the time there was Lindsay Pellerin working in the clinic with Dr. Rock, and thanks to my dad, who's like one of my best friends and one of the funniest, smartest people I know. He's difficult like me, but he's amazing. He shelled out you know, it costs money to do this rehab, and not only did he pay for it weekly, he paid for massage from Lindsay, and she was like my little hippie guardian angel. Like, she was amazing. I needed massage in the neck, and she just like, she knew where I had been mentally because she had been there herself, and she really helped keep me strong. And along with her, I had like close friend who was technically like my sports psychologist as well, but we're friends, and I still work with him to this day. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Yeah. And combined with him and Lindsay and Dr. Rock, like, that was the best possible first start to the year I had, which was the hardest, was the first year and a half, I'd say. And then I went on to see a psychiatrist who actually collaborated with Dr. Rock. And then I was able to see Dr. Richard Turmel in Quebec, who Dr. Rock referred me to for the gyrostim treatment in the machine. So between, I don't know, an MD, chironeurology.
I'll give you a quick, I just wanted you to know you had over almost 200 appointments at the clinic. I don't know, between Lindsay and Dr. Rock.
Amazing.
In 3.5 years. So.
Wow.
Thanks.
Yeah. I can't imagine how many. That's insane. Oh gosh, I'm tripping. But yes, between a chiro of neurology, an MD, and a psychiatrist, the MD being the psychiatrist, a massage therapist, PhD in performance psych and human behavior, and then Dr. Turmel in Quebec, who actually helped out a George St. Pierre, who was an MMA fighter as well. Didn't hurt selling him to me when I was going over, that he also recovered from doing his work. So between that, what is that? 6 people and my family who had to deal with a lot of stuff. Like, I got so, not only did I put in the work, but I got so grateful with like the people around me and like what my dad was able to help with. It just wouldn't have happened if it weren't for all those people. And no, there will be people who don't have a Jason, who's the friend of mine who got me into the psychiatrist, which can also be very difficult. But, you know, there's ways to raise money and such to get your appointments through. And I know there's got to be a way, like, health comes first. People can raise money to go to tournaments and do these things. There's got to be a way to raise money to pay these chiros who are really the biggest and most vital part of getting over a traumatic brain injury. So yeah, that's that part.
Yeah, that's amazing. And what was, like, do you see a chiro in Ireland? Do you have
I don't have a chiro of neurology over here. It's funny because, like, with my sport, with the wrestling especially, which I do 5 days a week, and a lot of live rounds, given that like wrestling's not my background, I kind of almost treat it like an Olympic cycle of deep dive into that particular area. And it really hits the nervous system like hard. And it's funny because if you overtax yourself because of the injury, I can really tell when it's my nervous system. And I almost have to like tell myself or remind myself it has nothing to do with the
Right.
injury. It has nothing to do with any of that. I'm just so in tune with that part of my body and just when it's fatigued and all of that. So yes, I do see a chiro now, which is really cool. He works with a lot of the athletes at the gym. Who knows that he doesn't know a ton about it, but he knows that I've gone through chiro to recover from a head injury. And it's just the irony being that he's actually been the biggest help in some of our injuries, and we see him now every couple of weeks, just maintenance and tweaks and stuff like that. But with regards to the neurology, I don't know. They're kind of hard to come by, so I don't have one out here. But just a regular chiropractor, if you will.
And what does a training week look like for you? I'm not. Are you? Do you have a fight coming up? Or are you kind of in between right now?
I don't have a fight set. I'm very, very hopeful that the promotion I typically fight with is called Invicta Fighting Championships. It's an all-female league. They're probably the best one out there for at least my weight class. I'm hoping to fight for them in November. I fought for a different promotion in July, which was kind of keeping me busy because Invicta didn't have something available. But yeah, no, the typical training for me, if you interview another MMA fighter from the States, you're going to hear something else. You're going to hear they train 3 to 4 times a day, or that they train. Yeah, that's fine, but that's, to me, incorrect. It's too much. I usually about 3 times a week, I'll train twice a day at the most. And then the rest of the week, I train 6 days a week. And then 3 of those days is twice at the very most. The rest of those days are one practice, but there's quite a bit involved in that. So it's a longer practice and stuff like that. So it equals out to like at the very most 10 sessions in a week for me. If there's more, it's very, very light and technical. And at that being said, on a good week, it's like somewhere between 8 and 9 sessions a week. I have a very high level coach that I have a close relationship with. I get a lot of questions in and technical work. I don't need to train 4 times a day to tell people that I'm really good at this. So I'm just letting you know when you hear it, it's unlikely. But yeah, so that's the fact that I can say that to you looking back. And I had the head injury where you couldn't drink coffee, you can't drink alcohol, you couldn't work out for 9 months, you couldn't raise your heart rate, you couldn't do anything, and that's what I'm doing now.
Amazing.
And I'm getting clipped in the face. I take pride on not taking a lot of damage, and I still have in fights, and I'm fine. So it's kind of cool.
If you could go back and tell like 2015 Katie something, what would you tell her? What would you say to yourself like 7 years ago? Maybe you're, I don't know, like a year in after your injury, you're doing all this hard work to get back because you have these big aspirations. What would you tell yourself?
I'd say just like keep staying on it the way you're staying on it. Like, of course, there's things I could have done better, like, you know, just different sleep things and stuff. But when you're doing nothing that you love, it's easy to stay up till 2 a.m. watching The Walking Dead because you're sad and you don't know what else to do. And, you know, like, sure, I could have been optimal, but there was only so much I could do to not hit a rock bottom, right? So I would just tell her how, you know, you're going to make it. You're going to make it. He told you you would. Just keep going. Like, believe me, my pro career after getting through a head injury did not start well. You'd think after coming through that it would be such a dream, like undefeated. You know, God, no. I'm 5-5, and I fought some of the best in the world, and it's been rough. But the fact of the matter is I'm on an upward trajectory. I'm trending up now. I might be well into my 30s, but I would just tell her, like, there's a reason you're being this stubborn, and it's because you actually do get through it. So It's kind of crazy.
It's crazy, but like I can see it. I look back to those years and the consistency you had, and
Yeah, I remember coming in, like, you guys saw me on some rough days, like coming out after crying and giving, even Dr. Rock's been frustrated, he's been sad, and he had every right to be. He had people who were way worse off than me, and he would try to remind me it could be so much worse. But I just remember his patience with me, like 99% of the time, he was extremely patient. He just like had days where it was like, listen, like, you're gonna have to suck this up because it could be worse. But the fact is, like, it was because of who he was and how he approached this that I stuck to it. And you guys were always so nice, and like I'd come in and I probably was rude so many times, but I just like I was struggling, and you guys made it so easy. But it was hard to be emotional in public like that. Like it's a rough go, right? And I think the hardest part about these types of injuries, you guys understood, and it was really neat because you saw people worse than me every day, was just that nobody understands that they can't see anything. They don't see anything wrong with you. They don't see injury. My Instagram was where, like, I had very few followers. It was like when Instagram kind of like I first got it, and I like poured my heart and soul onto it. I had to erase some of it. It was very cringy, but I kept some of the stuff that makes my stomach turn anyway to keep like a diary of it. And it was just like one of the hardest times in my life. It's not the first time my brain has failed me, but it it was very cool to come into your place of work and have you all just understand, because it was very, very hard. So, because my family didn't get it, my friends didn't get it. It was horrible. So, yeah.
So, Katie, we often have, people, athletes having injuries, traumatic brain injuries, concussions, and are finding it either difficult to find help, or they think that they maybe don't need help based on people they've talked to. But from experience for you, what would you say to that?
It was actually like very easy to get influenced by other people. A lot of what I got was, oh yeah, you're done. Like there's no way you're back, blah 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 blah. And a lot of my like little Instagram diary there was venting about that. So I was like, I can't look back on that. But you might, if you are, especially if I'm talking to those who are seeing Dr. Rock, you're in the right place. What helped me big was, if I have to be quite honest and name drop, was knowing that Dr. Rock had come from a similar team from the Carrick Institute in Georgia, which helped Sidney Crosby get back. And it was all just like kind of my own little bits of research and linking to that made me realize, like, look, like this is the real deal. It's like, use your head, like this can work. And sadly, like name dropping like that can help. I had a UFC athlete call me because he saw my post and I had tagged him in it. And I don't know how that happened, but he saw it and he called me and talked to me on the phone. And he actually was up for a UFC belt at one stage, but had to retire in that fight camp. He's Canadian. And he called me to tell me to keep going and doing what I'm doing and to seek help and all of that. So it was really neat to have that experience, because he also thought what I was doing, I think he had disagreed with something I had said to kind of encourage me along what I was doing, because he had Sidney Crosby call him when he was, it was a neat little like line down. I was like, this is crazy. And so when that happened was actually when I went to see a psychiatrist, and it turned out I had some underlying issues beneath that head injury. Regardless, I do have a mood disorder, and it can actually affect things even worse. But the fact is, like, that came tenfold with the head injury, and it needed to be addressed. And when that was being addressed, things also got better. So to get more on topic, when you're asking about athletes needing to be encouraged, if they're seeing Dr. Rock, that's a great start. Now, if they're going to be stubborn with the idea of a chiropractor, it could be as easy as, sharing these stories and sharing these athletes, even that likes of Jonathan Taves and whomever else who have gotten better through this process. If you are suffering with these symptoms though, and you're thinking that it's going to be fine and it's coming up on like 6, 9 months, like just be honest with yourself and realize like there is something wrong and this could affect your life after sport. This could affect your relationships, you having children, you doing anything physical ever again. So if you're an athlete who works hard and refuses not to work hard at this, and then you can go back to it. Like, there's no point in pretending like you're too hard of a worker and too much of an athlete to stop. You're almost doing the easier thing by continuing. The harder thing is stopping and doing what you're supposed to do. So, in a sense, I could be a brat and say that you're being weak, but I won't do that. I'll just say, get your ass to the clinic, listen to the words that he's saying, and realize, like, if you want to be strong, stop now. Do your exercises. They're uncomfortable. Do them, and you'll get back. Because I saw a very inspirational fight on the weekend, and he's like, look at me now. Watch me now. Look at me now. Like, that's what I want to say to all of you. Look at me now. Like, I couldn't do anything. And I don't have symptoms. So let's not make it so that you can never do this again.
Right. Well, a TBI, I mean, you can relate it to, let's say, I don't know, you have a ACL tear or something.
Yeah.
I mean, you do the work. It's hard. It sucks. It takes time, energy. It doesn't work on a
get out of shape.
Yeah. But you do the work and you recover, and look at me now. Like you can do it.
Yeah. Yes.
It's doable.
If I can do it, you can do it. Like, I mean, no, when I came back and fought really tough people right off the bat, it wasn't perfect, but I remember going 0-2 and being like, maybe I should, become a zookeeper like I wanted. Like, it got tough, right? But it's like, I just kept at it. And just like I did with the head injury, I wouldn't take no for an answer. I just kept going. It kept going. It kept going. Be the stubborn athlete you're being about not training with this.
Right.
And I promise you that's the way you'll get back. I get messages. I think I've gotten up to 12 to 15 messages from people since my recovery asking what clinic I went to. So I've actually, through Instagram, I'd like to think I've sent like maybe 15 people to Dr. Roth, but provided they did actually come. But I know there's people like who are really want to get better and they saw that I did it. But when it comes to hearing what has to be done, it gets daunting. But if you add up all the time in the day of those 3 to 4 sessions that you have to do, like it's worth it. It's worth it. And it can be done. Like, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's I think back on it, it's very intense, but.
So Katie, on your your road to recovery over the several years, can you think of any moments or things that had happened where it was either a milestone or a setback, or even like, hey, this is working, I'm getting better? What? Any of those moments?
Those ones. Sorry.
That's okay.
Yeah, those ones were like pretty, like they stood out. So like I got a job as a personal trainer, and then like a week after was when I got the head injury. But the one who hired me let me keep the job, and they let me train like one person. And I did it like slowly, and we'd hang out in the office, and I met like the manager of the place I worked out ended up being like my best friend today, Steph Pendleton. And she, what I said before was just that if you meet somebody who actually wants to hear about what you're going through, and what I mean by is like ask you questions about the rehab, has an open mind, still wants to talk to you even though you're not making sense all the time. And yes, I would be a little slower, a little bit foggy. And don't let that person out of your life. Like, keep them around and see what's going on there. See if you can be close. Like, don't let that person go, because that's a connection if I've ever seen one. And we're I guess I'd have to say that the TJ Grant call was a turning point, because I went then on to seek mental health, uh, address some mental health issues. But I will say, lastly, that my friend Jason Brooks as well. There was I got hurt in May of 2014, and I went to house sit for him January of 2015. And it was 2 weeks. He went to Hawaii with his wife. They're amazing people. His wife, Jen, helps people with radiation therapy, and she works in cancer care. And they're just these wonderful human beings. And they knew what I was going through, and they let me stay in their house for 2 weeks. And I was just able to start working out at that stage. I guess I hadn't worked out in 9 months. Kind of barely. I could do a little bit. And Lindsay Pellerin recommended a little bit of a yoga workshop, like a slow moving yoga workshop. And I did like this little cleanse, which I'm not pushing cleanses. I'm just saying it was like just something to get me moving and something to focus on, a goal. And after that 2 weeks, I remember just staying in his house, relaxing, doing this little yoga thing, and watching Grey's Anatomy, and getting in contact with a close friend of his who also had some mental health stuff. And that was when I felt a change. It was like a really important time in my life, that 2 weeks all by myself, just to reflect, where I wasn't yelling at my family for doing nothing or being loud when they weren't being loud. I was actually in the basement of his beautiful little house all by myself, and everything started to change. So I met my best friend. I got a call from somebody who never needed to spend time on me, and I spent 2 weeks alone. And those were big moments that changed my life. We could get more specific and talk about actually getting the treatment in that machine in Quebec, but that's more specific. That was huge. But when it comes to just like relationships and moments, those were big for me, and I wanted to share them. Yeah,
Those are very important. And these lifelong friendships and connections are so important for everything. So yeah, thank you for sharing.
I got lucky.
Yeah,
I was very fortunate. So yeah.
And do you still keep in contact with all these people to this day?
I don't. Pardon me. I don't talk to the UFC fighter. I understood and get it. He opened a gym and had more kids, and decided not to continue fighting after his injury. And I completely understood. He was actually another one that didn't find the type of treatment I had till like a year and a half or so later after the injury. That usually affects people a great deal. So I will say, just on a side note, that it is harder for those that have been hurt for over a year to then find the right doctor, but they can still recover. They can still get the help. I was just fortunate enough to do it right away. But yeah, Steph is actually one of my best friends. I was just in Canada. I've known her for 8 years, and we were just like, I just had a sleepover at her house a couple weeks ago in Canada. So maybe 3 weeks ago. So we're still like really, really close friends. And she'll definitely be my maid of honor and all that kind of thing. So it's like, we're good. And Jason Brooks I talk to every week, the one I stayed in his house and got me into my psychiatrist and stuff. So yeah, they're very, very close people in my life. So
that's awesome.
Yeah, thanks.
Well, I think we're gonna wrap it up here. So thank you so much for
thank you for
sharing your experience. You're welcome. Where can we find you? I know I follow you on Instagram. I have for a long time. So could you just share a little bit about where we can find you? And I think you're the Queen of the North.
Yeah, I am.
So I love it.
I'm actually starting to love it too. It was a bit ballsy at first, especially when things weren't going smoothly, but I still like it. So I am Katie Saull. 2 L's, like Saull on my Instagram is where I'm most active. if you look down deep, deep, deep onto my Instagram, you'll find a bit of a diary there from this head injury. Um, it won't, there'll be some cringy things on there. You'll be like, really? It's a bit cheesy. It's a bit whatever. If you take away some of that and just see that I was just sharing my step by step experience, I couldn't erase a lot of it because that was my recovery. If you're at all interested, don't be afraid to reach out to me on my Instagram. I will respond, and I'm happy to do calls with people who are suffering. I've done one or two before, so I've had people reach out for who to go see. But if you need someone to talk to who actually got out on the other side of this, who didn't just go through it, but actually came out on the other side, I'm happy to talk to you. I have Twitter too, but mostly my Instagram. And lastly, I just want to share a couple of songs that meant a lot to me. You Can't Rush Your Healing by Trevor Hall, and Waves by Mr. Probs. Those are my two head injury songs. They meant a lot to me, and those are just the words. Those are just things that I want to say to people in a way, because I'm not artistic enough to do it myself. So
Okay. Well, we'll leave those for sure. Yeah.
Thanks.
Well, thanks again, Katie. Good luck. Happy training.
Thank you.
And
thank you so much for having me.
Looking forward to seeing what's next for you in the ring or cage. Yeah.
Yeah, hopefully we're in the cage before the end of the year. So.
Yeah.